What you really learn is from your peers, and that means your equals, and that means your generation. Don't respect the older generation. Cinema is vampiric. It needs new ideas, it needs new blood always. If you've got ideas, hang on to them and keep pushing at them, and get your peer group, your equals, the people you went to college with, or the people that you hang out with, to help you with them.
Your first film is always your best film, because that's really when you don't know what you're doing. So that's full of real innocence and naivety.
Because all filming is about everybody thinks they know what they're doing. Bollocks. You do, on one level, technically, things like that. Then you can get all the best people in the world and they can't even take off and it just stays down here.
Yeah. One of my beliefs really is that we try and limit our budgets, because to have that kind of freedom, that kind of slight uncertainty, deliberate uncertainty in a way, is very dangerous with a lot of money. You can waste a lot of money very, very quickly. You can go down blind alleys and things like that. But if you have a circumspect budget, you're allowed a certain degree of it. But you've got to try and keep a naivety in there, a kind of delicious naivety if you can, which lets you discover things in the way you portray characters, situations, cities, landscapes, that surprises you in a way. And then you hope it'll surprise an audience, I guess.
That was one of the principles behind why we didn't want to just make a straight sequel that just followed the first film. You don't need to have seen the first film to have seen this film.
Yeah.
It's a standalone idea in its way. There's definitely benefits if you have seen the first film and know a bit about it, but it's an original idea and an original story.
I think the premise, we could be eviscerated by ourselves, really, is an absolutely plausible one. I mean, it's whether it would be through a psychological virus caused rage, I don't know. But one of the reasons that the film works, I think, is that people do connect with it to a kind of malaise they feel about life at the moment, and certainly a kind of threat amongst ourselves as human beings of what we're doing to each other. And that the monsters are us, really, in a way, that there's not something that we can blame on something else like aliens or something terrible mutation of biology. This is actually something that comes out of what we're like.
But the 28 years gap makes you think, how would the virus, how is it going to feed itself?
Because the creatures in the original film, the infected, they burn up so much energy in their rage, that so much calories, basically, they burn, that they would die very quickly. They'd starve very quickly unless they learnt to eat. And to learn to eat means to learn to hunt. But we also know from our own experiences of COVID that viruses mutate and evolve, and sometimes to our benefit and sometimes not. Alex Garland, who wrote it, and he's a fantastic filmmaker, and he's a big zombie fan. He likes zombie movies. I wasn't sure about zombie movies. I remembered that I was in a relationship with a dancer. I'd never known somebody who lived through their body. Yeah. We started thinking about athletes then. Everybody said, you can't get athletes because they're just on such strict timetables getting ready for the Commonwealth Games or the Olympic Games. And then somebody told us about this agency in East London for retired athletes. I went along to this agency and they got all these athletes in, and I did this workshop with them. And I said to them, like the crew are gathered there, I said, okay, attack me. And I said, as violently as you can, but you've not got to hurt me. You've got to stop at the last second. It was absolutely terrifying. And I remember thinking, that's it. That's what we'll do. It's because you can't get away. Because they're moving so fast, they feel so powerful, and they're so infected with this feeling of wanting to hurt you that you'd stand no chance. Most people would stand no chance. When I watch films, I'm always watching not just the central characters, I'm always watching everybody around. I also try to make people feel less self-conscious, because that's the enemy of this kind of work, is that people feel self-conscious about themselves at acting. So I try to make sure they all believe, and I don't mean act it out, but I'll do things like when I meet the infected, I'll say, you make noises like this, and the look on your face, and you've got to be like a child on the set. Because we are doing make-believe. Like, if I can do that, and I appear to be important, then they can do it as well.
Right.
And not feel daft or silly.
And you often find a lot of film directors, and they're not frightened of actors, but they don't understand them or they're wary of them. And in fact, they get you out of, especially when you're starting off, they get you out of so many corners. If you have a good relationship with them, they can help you when you're behind, and you've got 3 pages left to shoot and there's no time. they'll just do it for you, you know, and in one take. And there's so many different ways in which they help you.
For the two young leads, if you like, Jim and Selena, we wanted people that weren't really known. We didn't really want stars to be in it, so we kept the budget down so that we wouldn't have to have a movie star in the parts, because we felt that they should be Mr. and Mrs. Anybody, really, that they should be just people off the streets that you didn't have any previous relationship or history with. So we found this guy, Jim. We phoned Cillian Murphy, this Irish actor, and this girl, Naomi Harris, to play Selena. And it's easy to find inexperienced actors who haven't got much track record, but of course the danger is that they won't be able to carry the film. And they've done a wonderful job, because they've been able to actually, you experience and you get carried through the whole film by these two.
I rely on the writer and actors to bring character in, and I encourage them and support them in that. But I don't do it. My process is more visual, really. And what I do, and I say this to, and I still don't think enough people do it, is we create a kind of Bible of images for each film, so that there's a visual language to look at. And because otherwise you just talk. You've got a script, which is words, and you end up just talking about stuff.
I like to shoot wide. I like to see characters in a landscape, and I like actors to physicalize a film, so we actually sense their physicality in a film as well. So I'm always trying to do that, I guess, if you like. And I think when you move the film, you kind of create a visceral energy, which I love the films to have. You know, they feel like they're working for the audience, you know.
But basically what we did is we did it very, very simply. We turned up very, very early in the morning. We had a lot of cameras, digital cameras, because we were able to use a lot of them, so that we could capture enough material in 2 minutes of the traffic being held back to create a sequence so that you would feel like the camera's moving around town with him. So there were 3 or 4 shots and the editor could spin them out so that they felt like it was a protracted space he was walking over. In fact, it's only like 2 minutes, 90 seconds that the traffic will be held for. Because even at that time of the morning, and even with a lot of traffic marshals who were usually very pretty girls that we sent out to ask motorists to wait, please, even then you only get 2 minutes of tolerance from people before they go, oh no, I've got to go to work, you know, and they go back into the rage, really, which we all exist in cities. And that's how we did it.
The camera, and it is true what Orson Welles says, you can, everything you need to know about a cameraman will teach you in an afternoon. It's then what you want to do with that knowledge, you know. You know, everything, not everything that cameramen know, but what a director needs to know about the camera, technically, you can pick up very, very quickly.
But we did want to use some of the everyday technology that we all have, because that was the idea in the first film, is that we shot it on domestic video cameras, because we thought, well, they'd be around. The apocalypse happened, they'd be lying in the street at the time, just like iPhones would be now. You know, and you could pick them up, and if you could get in them, they'd probably have a depiction of what was happening, or evidence of things that would be either terrifying or very moving, stuff like that. So it felt like we had an obligation to kind of reflect that, but the technology has moved on so much now that when you use these things, they shoot at 4K, which is just incredible quality. It allowed us to be very light in our footprint in areas of the country that we wanted to suggest hadn't been touched for 28 years. You know, a crew coming in with a normal equipment level is going to make a big footprint. So we used drones a lot as well, so that we could film sequences that cameras couldn't possibly get those shots without making it look like a herd of elephants had gone through. And we used them for these arrays, and that was for very particular reasons, impact of certain visceral moments in the film. And the idea was to capture as much of it as possible, and they could be anywhere in your widescreen view. So that the unease, which came from being very jittery in the first film and very gritty, this is to do with much more to being able to see this landscape, which has changed enormously because man hasn't been putting its fingerprints on it for 28 years. But the danger could be anywhere out there within that. So that we shot in that format that's, that, like you said, Sinners uses as well. And finally, we wanted to use these rigs, which allowed us to use multiple cameras. And that is something that we did do in the first movie in a different way. That just allowed us to position 10 cameras on Westminster Bridge and walk him across. This is much more about having a visceral capturing of the violence, of the brutality of some of the imagery.
and it allows you to kind of, it's like a poor man's bullet time.
And in this case, I want you to not only just be on this journey, I want you to come back and see Nia DaCoasta's film, which inherits some of the characters from this.
When we appointed her, we realised we'd broken up something that we needed to break up, which is very much a boys' club. She came in and she said, I'm not going to make a copy of your film, you know. And you went, oh, okay. I didn't ask you to, but maybe I would have done if you hadn't already said I'm not going to. And it was great, actually, because it was, when you take on these deals, making a back-to-back film, you also, it's not just the logistics of actually directing the thing. I've got to concentrate on editing the first one to get it ready for release now, while she shoots the second one and she's editing now, getting the film ready for its January release. So you're on a timetable that you have no choice about, really. Yeah. But it was funny handing it over to her. I was like, it was fine. And then I went up to see them after they'd been filming a couple of weeks. I went up to see them, and the actors were so enthusiastic about her. I was a bit pissed off. I thought, changed their loyalty, have they? Yeah. They said they really like me, and now it's like we really like Nia.
You've got to have a reason why people will come out and sit in a dark room and watch your film, you know. And I feel that obligation very, very strongly. So I want to give them something that pushes boundaries as much as possible, and yet doesn't become abstract, doesn't become exclusive or excluding, really.